But looking at proof, you know, like I could pretty much look at the charts of gold and silver and say there's definitely manipulation taking place. Without a doubt, those chart patterns are not natural. You don't sell futures into a rising market to potentially lose money. No, economic actors don't do this. So that to me is proof of something going on. Now, who's doing it and why? That's where the speculation comes in.
SDBullion.com is a high-volume physical gold, silver, and precious metal dealer. We are committed to being your trusted source for low-cost, highest quality investment-grade bullion products. Visit SDBullion.com for more information.
Welcome to Silver Doctors Exclusive. Today I'm excited to have first-time guest, Mr. Kerry Lutz. He's an author, market analyst, as well as a commentator. And today he's joining us to share his thoughts on the global economy, financial markets, and a variety of other subject matter. So Kerry Lutz, welcome to Silver Doctors.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on. It's really an honor. I've followed your work for years, and it's great to connect with you.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to sit down with us. Definitely looking forward to getting your thoughts on a variety of subject matter. But before we dive into the actual questions, I'm curious to find out, for those that may not know Kerry Lutz, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you've arrived at this point in your career?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm a recovering attorney. I practiced law for 30 years. I'm a bit of a startup junkie, startup entrepreneur. I love starting new businesses up, helping people to do it. And it's kind of a hobby now more than anything else. And, had a very middle-class, upper middle-class upbringing in suburbs of New York, in Essex County, New Jersey, and discovered Austrian economics one day while looking around the library at Pace University, where I attended, and found Ludwig von Mises and all of the Austrian economist books, and gobbled them up. And I've been a libertarian Austrian School of Economics devotee ever since. So it's been basically, I was 19, it's been 43 years. And I was just waiting for this thing to blow up. When 08, 09 came along, I said, this is it. I understood exactly what was happening and jettisoned my law career and started podcasting full-time in 2011. And, the only thing that surprised me over the past 10 years is that they've managed to keep the game going. But then looking back on it, it's so obvious, and I should have understood it back then, that the world wasn't going to come to an end quite then.
All right. That was good. So I appreciate you for sharing that. And so I'm curious to find out, so we're 10 years removed since that time frame there, and there's a lot of things unfolding right now. So I'm interested in getting your take on what's currently going on and where it's all heading. And so I'm curious to find out, at this current moment, what are you keeping an eye on the most? What concerns you the most about current conditions, financial markets, or whatever?
Well, the crisis du jour is the repo market, and that's the market for overnight securities, interbank, interfinancial institution, money market funds. And one day, Chase Manhattan Bank, JP Morgan Chase, just decided not to finance it any longer. And that made rates jump up to 10% overnight rates until the Fed jumped in and just shoveled in loads of money. And what it told me is the only times that the repo market does not function properly, and it's been a market since 1917. So it's 102 years old. It's as old as the Fed. It was designed to help finance World War II, the repo market. It's been successful in terms of achieving central bank goals. So if that's a success, I don't know, but let's just assume for a moment that it is. So when it stops functioning, you better wake up and smell the coffee and take a look. And why is this happening? And I see other analysts starting to come to this viewpoint. My feeling was that a bank had failed, or multiple banks, either, and it doesn't matter where they are because the whole financial system is interconnected. And this is the Fed's effort to zombify the bank and stop it from bringing the system down. So I'm not too worried that it's actually going to bring the system down, but it's a crack in the system. And, people talk about de-dollarization, shifting to the yuan. Look, what we have here in the United States is a semblance, a shadow of the rule of law. Martin Armstrong said it best: the rule of law is why China cannot become the number one economy, the lack thereof. And all of these riots happening in Hong Kong, they're going to spread to the mainland if they don't brutally put down the rioting in Hong Kong. But when are they going to do it? Every day they don't do it, it makes President for life, Xi, look weaker, and he's going to be taken out by his own party if he doesn't act. So I look at those two things, and there's a lot of flashpoints going on in the world here now. I mean, they're rioting all over the place, but to me, the most significant riot by far is in Hong Kong, because these are not like peasants. This isn't a peasant uprising. There are no peasants in Hong Kong. These are people who were once free and are seeing their freedoms erode and are taking action against immeasurable odds that they cannot win, but they feel that it's worth it. And when you see them on the street with the masks on, they're not doing it for Antifa purposes, like we're going to commit crimes and we want to cover it up. No, they are putting the masks on so that the surveillance state can't see who they are and penalize their social credit score and take them down and apprehend them. So it's a whole different thing, those masks. And, I look at that and I say, these are really brave people, because they have to lose, and yet they're willing to risk life, limb, property, whatever measure of prosperity they have there. And they're holding up American flags, Trump 2020. I mean, that is pretty ballsy. It's a movement, and it's just emblematic of the movement that's happening around the world right now. Maybe there's 12 or 15 countries experiencing social unrest. Look at France. I think they've gotten to the point they don't even know what they're demonstrating against anymore, but it's just they have to keep doing it, because if they don't, then they admit failure. But I think this is a trend. John Rubino over at Dollar Collapse has written about it. It is taking the globe by storm. But of course, here in America, as long as you get your 3 squares a day, you can fill your tank up with gas, and the government prints up more money and sends it to you, everything is fine. But clearly, everything is not fine.
All right. I would agree as well. And so I appreciate you for sharing that. So I'm curious to, go back a little bit into what you said. You mentioned the cracks in the system, and it started to become more evident in the banking sector. And so I want to walk through some of the scenarios of what's currently underway, because Jerome Powell mentioned that, sure, these are not emergency measures. These are just, regulative banking liquidity issues due to Q3 coming to an end, and they were in need of funds. And so we got Q4 now also around the corner. And so it looks like it's not QE, but it is QE. Is it QE?
Well, I did a podcast with somebody, and the title was "None Dare Call It QE4." I mean, you could call it whatever you want. It's monetizing debt. It's buying back securities with freshly printed money. And this, by its very nature, is inflationary. They managed to contain the inflation. But look, I was in New York. Those prices in New York are going up 15 to 20% per year. The rents are escalating. Inflation under Austrian economic terms is increase in the money supply. That's inflation. And that we've clearly had, and not all that money has been sterilized. So maybe in the Midwest, maybe where you are, inflation isn't as obvious, or waning purchasing power of the dollar. But in New York, I was just stupefied by it, because real estate, because the money has, Mises said, when you print money up, it will go into different sectors of the economy in different ways. You can't predict what's going to happen, but you have this huge malinvestment in real estate, which has driven up rents, especially retail rents, to the point where restaurants and businesses really are finding it extremely challenging to survive. And the landowner has to raise the rents because they've got all this debt. They've refinanced whatever, they bought the property, and you're just seeing the natural, maybe it's not hyperinflation, but it's heightened inflation. And I'm not predicting hyperinflation for the country because I think a lot happens before that. And the reserve currency, it's in so much demand all over the world. That was another surprise. But I was told that a guy named Bob Hoy, a great economic historian, said that in times of a credit bust, which is what we had in 08, 09, we had literally the credit markets implode. The reserve currency always does best. And it's because the simple reason, like you're going to put your money in the euro, a currency that's probably not long for this world. You're going to put it into Zimbabwe dollars. You're going to put it into yuan. No, because you're going to stick, even though the dollar's weakened and such, it's still a $5 bill printed by the, going back 200 years just about, is still going to buy merchandise. It still has purchasing power, even though it's a fraction of what it was. It still works. The dollar, every dollar that's ever been printed in existence is, paper dollar still has worth. It can still be used. Now, obviously, you're not going to spend a dollar that's 200 years old because its collectability aspect, its value is way higher than its face value. But the point is that if you wanted to, you could. And, that type of credibility and that record dies hard. It probably should have died quite a while ago, but through a number of different financial alchemy and financial engineering, they've managed to keep the thing going long since it should have disappeared.
Yeah. Now, a part of that is that, the current status of the Federal Reserve note is still of value because it's the reserve currency. But there's also a lot of concern, I would imagine, from other nations that have basically based their economies upon the reliability of the currency, whether it be for international trade or whatever it might be. And so now in this current environment where they're creating excess reserves to save the banking sector primarily, I would assume that it's going to be a matter of a loss of confidence from governments around the world, to where we see other programs being built, such as, the BRICS, we got AIB, all these initiatives being put together now. So do you think that these are being done strategically in the time frame where the Federal Reserve note is no longer wanted or is rejected?
You know what they say, money can't buy happiness, but it'll do till the real thing comes along. There is no alternative system. There is no plan B. I know Russia, China is supposedly doing it, but there's no rule of law. You can't, England had rule of law. Rome had rule of law. Eventually they lost it. England still has a little glimmer of it. But rule of law goes hand in hand with all of this. And even though, I like to say the US dollar is the Taj Mahal of Baltimore, it's like, it's in a real bad neighborhood, but it's still the best looking house there. And until there's some other system, and cryptos are just not going to do it. They're just not at this point, I should say, and not in their existing form, because they can be blocked. They can be stopped. You can shut down the 7,000 Bitcoin nodes if you're a government. Either physically send, China just send out troops to every Bitcoin node and destroy them or pull the plug on them. And the same with the US, but they don't really even need to do that. They know where they are. You look at the map and you just cyber attack everyone, stop access to those nodes, every single one in the world for 48 hours, 72 hours, there's no more Bitcoin. And to my knowledge, they're trying to address this issue. They know it's real. It's called eclipsing the node. They know it's a real threat, but there's still no way that they can stop it. Look, there's no other power greater than a sovereign power to issue currency. And they are just not going to let these pirateers, as they would look at them, take over the international monetary system. And people say, well, the big banks are getting into it. The big banks do what they're told in the final analysis. They're just a stage set for the federal government. They lost any semblance of independence or freedom to act in the last crash. They're just an extension of the U.S. government, of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the U.S. government, and the U.S. government is the Federal Reserve. I don't want to hear about who owns the stock and whatever. The Fed does what they're told in the final analysis, and just look what Powell's done. He didn't intend to cut rates, but Trump said, I want the rates down. I don't know that he'll go negative. So to circle back, this is the only game in town. If you're a money manager in Frankfurt, Germany, and you got $10 billion to park overnight, are you going to go buy yuan futures or Chinese government debt? Or are you going to buy U.S. government debt? And until something happens to change that, and I can't say when, it will eventually, that's just the way the system is going to work. And got to get used to it, because that's it. It's not going to be any different.
Right. I would agree. And so as we're starting to notice, along with the adoption of the blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies and whatnot, there's more interest by governments or central banks to introduce their own digital tokens or coins, even though all national currencies are more digital than they are actual paper anyway. So they're trying to rebrand their digital assets or the digital currency and make it a coin-based type of thing. So can you see the Federal Reserve or the Treasury or something down the line, as maybe confidence might be lost, issuing a solely digital coin as legal tender, perhaps?
Yeah, but it wouldn't be a fixed coin. It would be able to be increased, the supply of it ad infinitum. It's probably inevitable. Once they figure out how to screw us better with digital currency, cryptocurrency, than with what they have now, they'll switch. Because it's all about protecting the banks, keeping the banks in business. The banks run the Fed. The government runs the banks. Where does it? It's a cycle. A vicious cycle, and where it ends, nobody knows. So certainly it's possible. Certainly they're exploring it. Supposedly China. Here's the thing. Like, there's so much information on the internet. One thing with my legal background, I get to analyze it and say, does this rise to the level of proof, or is it just hypothesis? We don't call it a theory. A theory actually is some hypothesis that has been proven true, but isn't yet firmly proven as absolute fact. So it remains a theory until proven otherwise. A hypothesis is speculation. And most of what you see on the web, especially about what the government's doing or what the Fed's doing, hey, show me the ledger entries. Don't tell me what you think. Because what you think, I have my opinion too. But looking at proof, I could pretty much look at the charts of gold and silver and say there's definitely manipulation taking place. Without a doubt, those chart patterns are not natural. You don't sell futures into a rising market to potentially lose money. No, economic actors don't do this. So that, to me, is proof of something going on. Now, who's doing it and why, that's where the speculation comes in. But that's the thing. It's so important to always question, well, okay, that's an interesting theory. It's actually an interesting hypothesis. What proof is there to make me believe it's more likely than not? It's like Kennedy being assassinated, all right? There's so much conflicting evidence that you pretty much got to be a moron to think that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. You really just can't believe it, with the magic bullet, with the witnesses that have been hushed up, with the people been killed, all of this. It's more likely than not that other forces were involved with Kennedy. And you could even go so far as to say, follow the money and who benefits the most. And then, look at those people and see that they did benefit and say, all right, they were involved in it. So it's a whole means of analysis that, being in the law for as many years as I was, when people give me legal theories and stuff who aren't lawyers, they don't know what they're talking about. And most of the people giving theories on the web do not know what they're talking about. But you do have a lot of people who are seasoned analysts who can interpret the number. The numbers tell a story. They aren't just numbers in and of themselves. Every set of numbers, a balance sheet, an income statement, a cash flow statement tells a story. And the charts of the markets tell a story for those of you out there who can interpret it. It's not easy. And a lot of times it's shrouded, like the COT report, Commitment of Traders report. Sometimes it means something and sometimes it's meaningless. And it's very difficult for someone not initiated to really interpret it properly. I can't really do it most of the time. I'll go over to a guy like Craig Hemke and say, Craig, what's this mean? Because it's flashing a weird signal. But sometimes the signal it flashes is so unmistakable that even I can see it. So always look for evidence. And if you look for that, look, just like the world blowing up here, 15 countries with major riots taking place, that's evidence of something happening. And then you got to kind of look and see, well, what is it telling us? And it's government failure, socialism failure, socialism fail. And socialism always fails anytime it's tried. And yet we've got these mind-numb robots here in the United States who think that socialism can somehow succeed here, where it's failed in every single instance that it's ever been tried. Now, you tell me the definition of insanity.
That's a good way of putting it there. Now, what I want to talk about now is that, you mentioned just basically looking at the data from the number. The numbers don't lie at the end of the day. And so one number that continues to increase that is very telling of what's currently going on is our national debt. And so we're at 23 trillion. And so once again, the word trillion is one of the things where it's tossed around frequently now because it's a common number in our monetary system. But yet 23 trillion, according to my lack of analysis or ability to analyze, is that it can't be paid back unless I miss something. So what are your thoughts on that? And how much more can the world take before they realize that all those debts cannot be paid back? And then what?
It's kind of like the bank never really wants to get their loan paid off. They just want to keep collecting the interest. Problem here is we're paying interest on interest, and that is a prescription for failure. But look, the government owns half of California, owns 85% of Nevada, all of these Western states. It owns most of it. And, there is no accounting for what the government actually owns. But my feeling is if they really wanted to get serious about the debt, they could sell off half the state of California and pretty much sell it to the Chinese or whatever and pay it down. I mean, I know that's absurd. They're not going to do it. But the point is that it's not so much the apparent deficit. It's those people like me, baby boomers, and like, hey, I'm counting the days off when I get my Social Security. And in 2.5 years, I get Medicare. And guys like you got to pay for it because you have no choice because we have a voluntary system of taxation. It's unsustainable, I think, is what you're pointing at. And it's unsustainable on the state level. It's crumbling much faster in Illinois and in California, even though they have a $7 billion surplus, supposedly. But that's just an evidence of how they're raping the taxpayer there. And $7 billion, but people are racing for the doors to get the heck out of California to move to Nevada, where there's no state income tax, or Washington State, or Texas, or Florida, where I live. People are voting with their feet. The tax law only made it that much worse. And really, hey, the billionaires, the super wealthy, are paying for it in California. They can afford to, but the upper middle class is paying for it too, and they probably can't. So yes, at some point the merry-go-round stops, and it isn't just going to slow down and into safety mode like the subway train when it's out of control and then it hits a switch and it shuts the train down. No, it's going to go crashing into the wall and through the wall, and wherever that's going to be, maybe there's some technology that's going to bail us out here. Maybe, I think you could argue that the internet really saved the United States economy back in the 90s and up to now. It really did amazing things for the economy, efficiencies that it brought, outsourcing, which everyone hates. So maybe there's a technological development just lurking out there that's going to save us, and we just can't see. We can't see it, but when it comes, it'll be so obvious, no one will believe it. Maybe it's a new energy source. I can't really foresee it, but there's something out there that probably has the potential to change everything. But it's like, yeah, if I win the lottery ticket, if I win the lottery on Saturday, it's going to change everything, but the odds aren't great. But Winston Churchill said, God looks after children, drunks, and America. And maybe he had a point, but if it goes on the way it's going and no superseding innovation comes that changes this all.
All right.
So,
Now, I'm sorry to cut you off. Now, so as we draw towards the end of our discussion, solutions. You hinted on solutions, so that's right where I want to transition into. So we kind of got an idea what the problems are. The problems as far as what's presented to us. We got monetary issues. Financial markets are not reliable as far as being able to trust the actual numbers and things of the nature as you pinpoint it. So solutions for your person that's listening. What are some things that people can do, in your opinion, that can position them in a natural sense, financially, for example, or
sure.
Yeah, that's being
always have an insurance policy because things could always get worse. There was that old joke from the 60s. Yesterday, I thought things couldn't get any worse than they already were. Today, I found out I was wrong. So they could always get worse. Like, I'm an optimist, and I do believe that this consciousness raising expansion is going to occur, but it won't be painless. So, obviously, you need to be some kind of prepper, but I can tell you from personal experience, prepping doesn't really work all that well in practice. Like, I'm in Florida, we had a hurricane, so I got to figure out, what do I take out of my house, because it might not be left standing, because they always panic you, the media. So, I had emergency preparedness food. I had a couple of, shall we call them, 9mm survival tools, and I brought them along for sure. I brought along a lot of ammo because I never knew if I was coming back or not. Who knows when you leave under this? So nothing really prepares you for that other than actually doing it. So I had to rethink my whole plan over that. So don't be an extreme prepper, but have a couple of weeks worth of food and have some survival tools at your disposal. Have some water. Do that because really these disasters are the norm, not the exception. At some point in time on the planet somewhere, there's a disaster taking place now. So don't think it's the exception, accept it as the norm. And, hey, do like I kind of go with Doug Casey is like kind of practice the golden rule in your own life. It's like you need to treat others as you want to be treated, even if they treat you badly. That doesn't mean being a sucker and just get taken advantage of constantly. But until proven otherwise, you have to make the assumption that everybody is honest and wants to reciprocate and, not be cynical, because that brings you down. When you're a cynical person, you do cynical things and you don't treat your fellow man or even your family or yourself with the respect that you should. And so, and pray and meditate. I think meditation, like I said, I'm not one of these new agey people. I've been meditating consistently for 3 years now, and it really has helped make me more stable, more calm, more thoughtful, and more attuned to other people. And hey, I'm not perfect, but I think some type of consciousness raising exercise is essential. Self-hypnosis, same thing as meditation. Whatever it is, just do it because it'll make you feel better. You'll be a better person for it. And I'm not saying it's going to cure the world's problems. I don't know all about all that, but it definitely is going to make you a better person. And it's not hard to do. There's a million meditation exercises on YouTube. I use different ones for different moods. And, just start out 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. It's all you need. You don't have to go do it for a retreat for 3 days. It's not bad to do, but I haven't done many of them. Just work on yourself. Invest in yourself. If you're lacking skills, get the skills. We didn't even talk like about college and that scam. But, like, look, right now we got a revolution in transportation taking place. We're going electric. This is just the way it is. For better or for worse, I'm not going to comment on that. I like electric cars, but a forced transition is never a good one. But we're doing it. So the number of people who actually know how to take apart a Tesla and make it work and fix stuff in it, it's so small. And you will guaranteed have a 6-figure plus income if you can figure out how to take apart a Tesla or any other EV and put it back together. And you know what the nice thing is? It's like you don't even have to get your hands dirty anymore because there's no oil, grease. Yeah, there's some lubrication. It's on the roads. The roads are dirty. So you're going to, learn these things, learn electricity, learn electronics, and invest. If you're a younger person, that's the way to go, because if you don't want to start your own business and you're going to work for somebody, you might as well be in demand. You might as well be the commodity that's in short supply. Only go to work areas where you will be in demand, where you can help set the terms, like a lot of engineering and mining engineering. But a lot of that's hard. You can learn how to work on an electric vehicle probably in a year, be able to take a Tesla, to strip it down and put it back together again. Hey, you know how many people there are that can do that? It's like hundreds in the country, just like being a blockchain programmer. They're not in demand right now like they were, where they could just get $500,000 and all the stock options that they asked for. But nonetheless, they're still making well into the 6 figures, into the low to mid 6 figures, and they're still in demand because everything's going to the blockchain. So go to get a job or a profession where you're in demand, where there's a shortage of people like you, and you'll never have to worry about it until the next paradigm shift.
Yeah. Well, Kerry Lutz, it's been great having you on the show. And for those that may want to follow your work and stay in tune with what you have going on, can you point them back to your direction and so they can be a blessing to your work?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, obviously, the Twitter feed's at Kerry Lutz, KerryLutz. Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. The site is financialsurvivalnetwork.com. We've got a free newsletter. Please sign up for it. I think you'll really benefit. My job is messenger. I bring you the information. A lot of times it's conflicting. You make sense of it, and you decide what to do with your life.
Sounds good. Once again, Kerry, it's been great having you on the show. Looking forward to continue to follow your work and stay in tune with you, and definitely have you back on sometime in 2020 and see where we're at there and get your thoughts on what's going on at that time. So once again, thanks for joining us here. Appreciate your time.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Mike.